You know what I think? I've been in the teaching.
Now, well, it's, what is it, May the 8th, isn't it? Yes, it's May the 8th, and I'm talking to Mrs. Burke of Brighton. B-O-U-R-K-E?
B-U-R-K-E.
B-U-R-K-E. That's the Irish one, isn't it? Now, Mrs. Burke was a nurse in the Depression. I'll come a bit closer. Now, do you mind telling me when you were born?
4th of August 1907.
1907. Well, in 1929 you'd have been about 22, wouldn't you? When the Depression started? 20-odd.
I started nursing in 1928 on the 3rd of May, and I had my 21st birthday after I was at the hospital for 3 months.
I see. Did you find it, what made you take up nursing?
Well, they talk of the Depression going from 1928 to 32, but there were signs of the Depression for many years before that. After the boom of war, early 20s, from about 1925 on, the shops were loaded with goods, and then the competition was very fierce. And at that time I was working in a large country store, and I was sent out to see what the other prices were in the other shops, because the competition was so keen, and we were never allowed, let a customer go out of a shop without buying something, quite different to what it is today.
This was in New South Wales?
In New South Wales, in Young, New South Wales. That was 25, 26, and about 1926 the competition was so keen that one man had, he was of German extraction, and he had imported a lot of goods from before the war, and his shop was just loaded with these things, and he sold everything at half price, which meant that the majority of the shops in the town just closed down. At this time
It's my fault. Yep, go on.
I was feeling that something was going to happen. I had no idea of such a word as depression, but I felt that there was no security in the business world. Also, I felt that I was telling a lot of lies. I was forced to sell things that were hanging on the shop shelves that the boss wanted to get rid of, and whether they were good or bad, we were encouraged to sell these. It was one great big lie, the business world, as far as I knew.
Was it hard for you to get jobs in country towns, for girls to get jobs?
Oh yes, if you had a job you stuck to it. And we worked from 9 until 6, and from 9 until 10 on Saturday nights. And even if it was a very cold Saturday night and there wasn't a customer about, the shop was never closed in fear someone came in to spend sixpence.
I see. And were you a farm? Did you have a farm background? Did you grow up on a farm?
Oh, originally my people were on the land, but they had 7 years drought in all the late 1890s and early 1900s. And by the time I was born, my father had come to live in the outskirts of a town, old rumbling house. We had an orchard all around it, and we were entirely self-supporting, which was very helpful to us when the Depression came, because we had everything really that we needed as far as food was concerned. Even our beds were made of the pluckings that we had off the ducks and the chickens.
Your eiderdowns.
The eiderdowns. And we never bought such a thing as a mattress. We all provided our own. However, I was feeling this tremendous insecurity in the business world, and I thought it's not very soul satisfying, this particular job, and I thought I would look round for something that was where I would have security. I had no highfalutin Florence Nightingale spirit at all. I knew nothing about nursing, but I had become friendly with a journalist who was the editor of the local paper, and his sister was a nurse at the Coast Hospital in Sydney, and he told me about this, and I thought, well, this is something that I think I would like, to get away from the country, and I thought, well, there will always be a need for nurses. So I put in an application. I hadn't any educational qualities beyond the QC.
What's QC?
A qualifying certificate in those days. So I went back to night school and went for a special examination, which I passed, and then I put my application in, and I had to wait a year before I was admitted to the coast. There were several other hospitals in Sydney, but being a country girl, the coast was built on the shores of the Pacific, out near La Perouse, and the open life and the golf links and the openness appeared to me much more than the closed city hospital. And also we were given pay of 10 shillings a week, whereas the other city hospital girls were getting 5 shillings or nothing.
Really?
So that little extra 5 shillings meant a lot to me. So I had to provide all my own uniforms, which I made myself, made my own great big long aprons out of calico and had them all starched. And I set forth on the 3rd of May 1928. Now I could go on and tell you the 4 years in that hospital, but it won't. It doesn't interest you here. It's a life apart. Before I went to the hospital, my brothers were training to be builders. They were getting 8 shillings a week, and my father was looking forward very much to the time when they would get £2 a week, as that was the basic wage in those days. But however, about this time, they lost their jobs. This was early 1928, I would think. My elder brother was very musical, and he spent 4 years of his life, he had just been trained, and he spent the next 4 years of his life going around the country towns, playing mandolins, banjos, cross-cut saws, leaps, mouth organs, and anything for a few bob in the streets.
Is that
Now,
so? And did he make a living? I mean,
well then of course they went on the dole and they
Yes.
got 5 bob. My other brother, younger brother, who was a different temperament, he tried to do odd jobs as much as he could, but sooner or later he landed on the dole. Looking back, when I think of the housing shortage, if those men had only been put to work, no matter what their pay, but if they had been put to work instead of idling their times around, how much better we would have been with the buildings going on. Also from the morale of the people to be doing something. And of course many people, once you got into the way of not working at all, it became a habit, and many of them never worked again.
Did your brothers get low in morale, or did they keep their spirits up?
They kept their spirit because we were a family, we were very strict Catholics. They had a lot of social life in the town, and although we were poor, we were a happy family, and we were more or less used to adversity, and our morale in our family anyhow never dropped. My brothers didn't drink or and of course drugs and all those sort of things were unheard of in those days. So from that angle we led a very simple life, but we had no problems like in that particular way.
What did your father do, or was he retired by that
My
time?
father retired. He retired when he was about 50ish. He did have a job in a building factory, timber factory I mean, and he retired at the age of 50. He wasn't terribly well, and he potted around this. He still had his farming instincts and
Grew vegetables and chooks and
yes,
things.
yes. Regarding the price of honey, we had our bees, and I used to help him when the bees swarmed, and I used to help him do the extracting. And I remember he went around trying to sell honey, the big 60-pound kerosene tins, for 10 shillings. Well, he couldn't sell them, and then later he got a lot of syrup tins and cleaned them and made them back to their original tin colour. And he used to sell those for, I think it was a shilling a £2 tin. Well, of course, what we were paying now for £2 tin, $1. However, to get back to nursing, once I started at the hospital, after the first day I was there, I found it very hard, and I really loved it from the day I started. My father told me that I would be back home in 3 weeks' time because I was too disobedient, and I wouldn't stick it out. However, there were times when I felt like bursting into tears and giving up, and I felt my father's voice at the back of me for a few weeks, and that made me keep on. I thought, well, I'll show him. However, I became so involved with the life of the hospital that we weren't really, we knew the depression was on and we knew that our family were having strife, but we had that feeling of being busy, of working hard, of being rather removed from the outside world. But on night duty we went down to La Perouse. Now this was an old government house built on the shores of La Perouse. It was near the old settlers' home. It originally had been a government house many, many years back, but I've forgotten the history of that. Instead of getting the tram to go down, which would have cost us a few pence, we used to walk through. It would have been a 2-mile bush track, sand dunes, stunted growth, ferns and so on. Now this was when we first saw these buildings of what was known as Happy Valley. They were old tin shacks made of tin, kerosene cases, corrugated iron, bag, just dotted here and there throughout the sand hills. They became more and more after time went on. Unfortunately, we never spoke to these people. Looking back, I wish I had have. But at the time, we were told that they were people who could not pay their rent, and rather than stay in the houses, they just went out and made this life for themselves. Today I don't think people would do it. I think they would stay in their houses even if they couldn't pay their rent. But in those days, if you couldn't pay, you went out.
How long were they there for? All your time at the hospital?
All my time at the hospital.
That's how many years was that?
4 years,
4
but
years.
I can't remember when they were disbanded. Of course, today the whole place is completely built on, and I doubt if
Built on, is it?
Oh yes, it's all built on now. It's all that area around opposite Long Bay Jail. However, out past Maroubra and Long Bay. The main thing I remember about this was that there was always a few stray dogs around, and the type of dog in the country, if we'd see around a poor house, we'd always think it had the mange. They were ill-kept looking dogs. Another thing that happened, which I now am very ashamed of, a girl came from this settlement over to the hospital to see if she could train as a nurse. Now we girls were all very snobbish, very uppish, I'm ashamed to say, and we rather ridiculed this girl behind her back when we saw her approaching the matron's office because she was so shabbily dressed. We thought it was very bad taste to come to apply for a position if you weren't spick and span and very neat and tidy. But looking back, I realise how ignorant we were and how ashamed now I am of this feeling. And I often wonder, with the shortage of nurses, where that girl is. And
She didn't get a job there?
No.
I suppose she could hardly afford to buy the uniform.
Well, that is so, but of course we felt we're on this side, and we were so busy and had the security of a 4 years training, we didn't think about that side. The same thing, of course, happens today.
Didn't you were there many, for instance, would you get patients from this area? I mean, would you have got really poor patients? Or
It was 1,000 bed. It was the largest hospital in the southern hemisphere, and we took everything. Scarlet, all infection, surgery, medical, VD men. There was a lazaret there also where we were not trained to look after these people, but occasionally they would come up to the hospital. But it was a very, very good training school. It was run entirely by the government, state government. All the senior personnel were World War I Army people. It was noted for its tough, hard training. In those days we had no medical students, which gave us an extra training. We had resident doctors, but no medical students. We worked very hard, 12-hour day, and it was really terrific work, but we we really did enjoy it.
This had been the tradition. This wasn't because of the times. This was the tradition of how
This was, yes. Later that hospital was taken over by the hospital in Charities. It is now one of the largest hospitals in Sydney, I think.
What's it called now?
It's now been changed to Prince Henry after the Prince Henry visited here in the mid-1930s.
So you weren't really aware of poverty among your patients?
Oh yes, because all these hospitals, these big public wards, were all public patients. Now, they didn't have to pay at all. The cost per week was £3, but no one was pressed for money. We had the first big ward I ever went to was a 25 bed of curettes. Now these were people who had all been to backyard abortionists, and it was a government hospital, and therefore it had to take these people, whereas a private hospital or a hospital in the city wouldn't take them for fear of infection, because septicemia was rife, and many of these patients died. And of course my first job as a pro was to go to the theatre in this particular ward, and I don't think I'd better go on from here, it's too blood killing. I don't think but we would have about 9 curettes in the morning. It was my job to go and clean up in and out between the theatre and the intervening cases, as well as do all my other work, but that's all a story by itself.
Now my experience in public hospitals is that the nurses are tended to be very uppish about this sort of thing, and more or less I've actually heard one nurse say that it served them right if they'd gone to an abortionist.
There are nurses who say that, but I would never feel like that at all. I had the deepest sympathy for these people. I would never judge anyone who had an abortion. It's their business, and I don't remember any of my friends discussing anything at all. They were always sympathetic to those patients. The group of girls that I trained with, they were very humane. But I have found this statement that you're speaking of. Well, I was brought up a Catholic, but I have heard Catholic nurses. I heard one quite recently speak like this. And it's a remark that I personally entirely disapprove of. Now, getting back to money, all these children with scarlet fever and diphtheria, this of course was in the days before antitoxin or anti-diphtheretic serum. I mean, they had antitoxin once you had diphtheria, but there was no preventative. Now, these children all came in from the majority of them from the poorer suburbs. They were filthy dirty, they had to be scrubbed and cleaned, and many of the patients we got in were filthy dirty, whether they were medical or what. My main feeling was that they were all from poor suburbs and they were filthy dirty. Many of them had to be really washed with ether. They came from the slums and they were so dirty. But we had a variety of people. But being so far out from the city, I would think that, I hate to use the word better class, but better class people would have gone to Prince Alfred and St Vincent's, and but in that area of the city it was bordering on the districts where it would have been the slum parts of Sydney.
And did someone told me too about public hospitals that people hated to go to them because the limitation on visitors and this sort of thing. Was it so? Did you could only have one visitor for a quarter of an hour or something? This was in Melbourne, I think. Did you have this sort of?
Oh, we had our visiting afternoons, 3 to 4 as far as I remember, or 2 to 3. I've forgotten
it was
which.
different in every hospital.
And we had to have everything ship-shape for visitors. And unless a patient was very ill or a special case, or sometimes if you'd see a patient with 10 people around a bed, well, you know that's not good for a patient to have too many, and you just use your discretion.
Yes, okay.
But the main thing about those days was the Scarlet Fever wards, where we had all these children, all ages varying from 2 or 3 years of age to 11 and 12. And the parents, of course, were never allowed to see them, only from the verandas all around. And of course it was what we called party day. The parents would bring all the food, we'd take it in and cut it all up and give all the kids a plate. It was shared with everyone. And then when the parents went away, the bawling matches and the screaming matches were really terrific. But being scarlet fever patients, you see, we couldn't let the parents actually in to see these children.
Was it a serious disease in those days?
Oh yes, fever? Oh yes. Scarlet and Dip was very serious, and quite a lot of children died. I myself, on my first night duty, I was in Ward 11, which was a ward of diphtheria. Although I had had scarlet fever when I was 14, I had to cook for 11 staff. I was given chops and a few potatoes, but then it had been the custom to provide a meal for the surrounding staff, which would be about 10 or 11, and we had to make the room, which was an ordinary daytime room, look like fairyland, cover up the coal buckets with paper and put flowers around and so on. But however, I just could not cook, although I'd come from the country. And I used to spend quite a lot of my money on buying tin fruit. Eventually I said, I hope I get diphtheria to get out of this ward. Sure enough, I got diphtheria. I was very ill for a long time. Eventually I came back to the hospital, and sure enough they sent me straight back to the same ward where I had got diphtheria. So I thought, there's one thing I've got to do, and that is learn to cook, and learn to cook I did. That I was making jam roly-poly puddings and had the staff coming all around for more.
Was this common to have to cook for the staff in the wards? Didn't they have dining rooms for the staff?
Oh no, the night pro did all the cooking for the staff all around that area, which would have been the sisters from the other surrounding scarlet, dip, measles, infectious wards, and the doctors and the night sister in that area. But when we were up in the big hill wards, well, we'd have to cook for 3. But usually you'd find the senior nurse would usually have a doctor in for supper also, so it meant providing him. No, there was nothing, just chops and potatoes, or sausages and potatoes. They were left there for you to do the best you could with. But it had become the custom to provide a 3-course meal. And
who paid for it? I mean, who got
paid for it myself? Paid for it ourselves. If we couldn't make a rice pudding, or didn't have the time, or ran out of ideas, many times I used to buy tin fruit, and I thought, well, there's always jelly and cream there, so that they have that for a dessert. You wouldn't dream of not giving them a dessert.
And everyone went through this, on your wages, your miserable wages.
Yes. But the interesting part was, in 1930, Jack Lang had promised us double rate of pay for night duty. Now, I was due to go on night duty, and I was looking forward to this very much. Well, then the big pink bank in Martin Place was closed. I had £30 in the bank. My other friends also had money in the bank, and they were so short of money that they had to sell their books for about half price. But I held on to mine, and then eventually when the banks, I borrowed money from my sister to carry me on, but I eventually got my £30 back.
Who would buy books?
Oh, well, people who were out to make money, people who had a bit of money, and I thought, well, we'll buy these, well, the same as shares, it was a gamble. We'll buy these books from these people, and they
half price or something.
half price, and then when, I suppose they had faith that the bank would come good, and then when the bank did come good, they were able to, that was double profit they were making.
Were you interested in politics in those days at all?
I had come from a family that was of an Irish background, Catholic, anti-English, very Irish, stubbornly Irish. The nuns that taught me were very much the same.
This was Anne Young, was it?
Had a covered up hatred of the English. And there's one thing I'd like to say here about the Advance Australia Fair. We were not encouraged to sing God Save the Queen. But we were encouraged to sing this tizzy song called Advance Australia Fair. This is, of course, I presume, where Arthur Calwell got it from, and it's still carried on to this day. But I often laugh when I hear Mr. Whitlam at the present time bringing forth this Advance Australia Fair, and it takes me back to the narrow-minded bigotry of my own day. If I had my choice, if we had to have a new Australian anthem, I would have the anthem that is now on at the beginning and end of War and Peace, which is the old Russian anthem. I think it would be very humorous to have the old Russian anthem, which is also sung in the Catholic Church as Tantum Ergo, brought into Australia by a socialist government, would be a combination of old Russia, Catholic Church and modern socialist Australia.
Well, that's how it was Advance Australia Fair, how you first heard it in the
Yes,
convent.
I think it's a tizzy song. I was the narrow-minded bit. But
Yeah, did you get interested in politics? You remember this is what we started off on.
I was always politics, Irish politics and Home Rule for Ireland was the topic of conversation at our mealtime, morning, noon and night. When I went nursing, I didn't bother at all.
Were you interested in Lang, apart from the fact that he was going to pay you the double?
We were going to get double pay, after all that it proved to me. There was an interesting political sideline here. Tom Walsh, his daughter, she was my senior, and on one particular ward, and one morning she came to breakfast. Tom Walsh at this time was in trouble with the wharves in Sydney, and he was going to be deported. And
was he an anarchist or an IWW man or something, do you remember? The name is familiar, but I can't quite remember what he did.
He was, I'd have to look up his story. I knew it at the time, yes. but we were all, he was, I think that he was a communist at the time, but then later he went over to the Japanese. So he was deported for that, at the beginning in this 1941 war. However, this young girl said, we had to change our names when we went to the hospital. My name in the country was Keane, but as there was another Keane there, I took the name of Carr Keane. Her proper name was Walsh. There was another Walsh there, so she took the name of Cooper. So we didn't know that she was the daughter of the famous Mr. Walsh. So she said, what do you think about this fellow Walsh from the wharves? We said, he's nothing but a commo. She said, I don't think he's a bad bloke at all. He's my father. However,
I suppose communism was quite an issue then, because after Russia hadn't long had its revolution. It had it only 10 years or so before.
1998, and I remember the Russian Revolution very well. I remember the whole leading up to that and when it happened.
But you weren't really interested in politics there?
No, I was too busy in the study and the work and the involvement at the hospital. But when I finished my 4 years...
When was that?
1932. I had a most dreadful feeling it was almost leaving a big boarding school and that you're going out into the big wide world, because we had this security. Now, I had 3 days off and I did my obstetrics at Crown Street, where I had no pay no day off for 6 months. It's now a 9 months training school, but it was 6 months. Now this was right in the heart of Sydney slums, Surrey Hills. There was poverty there, right and left, because the